So if everyone's ready, have a sip of whatever you're sipping. Have a sip, Will.
Oh, I did while you were talking. I had a sip of my coffee.
All right, making sure. All right, everyone ready? We're gonna try. We've been on for 12 minutes. We're gonna try to knock this out in around 25-ish. No one has to rush, but trying to keep it tight. So tell good stories quickly, Terrance.
Okay.
Can you do
He means
that?
me because I'm long-winded.
Yeah.
That was a dig at me, but you'd have to know us to know that was a dig at me.
I didn't even know it was a dig at you, but I think you're right.
It's because you're passive-aggressive.
Possibly. In 3, in 2. Welcome to an all-new episode of Work in Progress with John Lane and Will Barfield. This podcast explores leadership traits under stress with a special guest each week. We use a simple and accurate OAD assessment to identify key personality traits or superpowers, as well as the shadow side, kryptonite traits that appear when we're under stress. As always, we'll have some pod banter, shameless plugging, and we'll even let our guests talk for a bit. Of course, no humble brags. Welcome to the show. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another brand new episode of Work in Progress with John Lane and Will Barfield. Today, I'm going to try to look into the camera, actually. I'm not very good at that because I look at the screen. Will, how are you?
I'm good, and that's actually pretty hard. I find myself looking at my own eyes, or if
Which
I'm
are
looking at someone
beautiful.
else.
Which are beautiful.
Yes, they are lovely.
Yeah.
Or looking at someone else's eyes, and then when I look in the camera, it's like I'm looking into nothing and trying to talk. It's not easy.
Yeah, it's weird. I'm trying to move everybody to the middle, so I can. That's a trick. Allie taught me. Allie of our video, so that's good. I have to get at. All right, banter. A couple of things. One is our case study went out this week.
Yes.
Now, Terrance, you're going to come on in a couple of months, so this is going to be old news. Will and I are going to be like with the money from that, but now we don't know. So we're talking to our future selves. But we came out with our a branded case study for our culture of communication workshop from one of our startup clients. So that was exciting. Video went out today. That was neat. So what do you think of that, Will? You worked hard on that.
Oh, I did. Labored for hours. It was beautiful, John.
Thank you.
As is everything else you produce.
Oh,
yeah. You dig for compliments. I've got them. Keep on.
Beautiful. As long as you don't have to do the work, you'll compliment me, right?
Yes.
Awesome. And then here's like my planned banter is this will make sense a little later in the pod, but Will,
yes,
we no longer have to say generic traits when we get the superpowers and kryptonites. I have found a way to produce superpowers and kryptonite that's tailored to each. Look at those eyes. That's tailored to each guest.
Really?
Now they're going to sound a lot because the traits are already defined, but no more word generic. We fixed that.
I will never use that word again on the podcast.
Ever. And speaking of not generic, I'm John Lane.
I'm Will Barfield.
And we are
a work in progress.
Yes. Good to see everybody. As everyone knows, we always have a special guest. Will, how do they know our guest is special?
Because it says so on the slide, and slides don't lie.
Slides don't lie. Terrance, welcome.
It's a pleasure.
Introduce yourself, please.
Well, I will first start off as being a work in progress as well. But I am a professor at NC State University. I'm shared across 2 departments, Africana Studies and Social Work, and I engage in the community deeply. That's a passion of mine. Have led as a school teacher all the way to a national role, and just excited about leadership and understanding leadership. So glad to be here.
Awesome. Just folks who are tuning in might know that you've dabbled in politics. Is there an announcement you'd like to make that will come out in 8 weeks? Or are you good?
The announcement is that I am work in progress, but I did run for mayor in 2022, and our city is still looking for leadership. And so just a really good position to be in to really have some choices.
Love having you on.
I got a question. about that real quick. Terrance, if you win or had won, how does that impact your ability to continue doing the teaching? I don't know what the hours are that are required for a mayoral seat and how that impacts full-time work.
No, so in our municipality, it's part-time to be a mayor. And so and so we have a council member who's also a professor at NC State, Professor Jane Harrison. And then we also have a school board member who's a professor at NC State. And so they just reduce your teaching load. And so most of your work is research and in the community.
That's super cool. Thank you.
I'm going to go on record and say, to me personally, it's an embarrassment that our state capital has a part-time mayor. Now, I don't want to take away from your dual work. That's not my role. But we should have a full-time mayor.
Yes, sir.
With no potential strains on their interests based on who employs them or doesn't employ them. There's plenty of work to do around the city of Raleigh.
I agree.
For a full-time mayor. But that's not what this
sounds like you're announcing a campaign there, John. Is that what
Yes, I am. I've been in North Carolina for 4 years. Elect me. That's not what I do. That's not how I help. Here's how I help, along with my pal Will. We use the OAD assessment, which you took, as has every one of our guests.
Yes.
To define your leadership traits, and then we're going to pressure cook them and show how they act under stress. Will, why did we pick OAD?
Because it's highly accurate and easy to administer. Terrance experienced that. A couple pages, select some adjectives, off you go. Eliminate social desirability distortions because of that word selection as opposed to multiple choice or more than, less than, or rank this. And it's built to the standards of leading international psychological institutions and rating agencies. John's highlighting those with our big purple arrow. And what that it tells you is that the data can be trusted. It is scientifically verified.
That's what we do.
Doctors like Dr. Ruth here.
Something like that. All right. So we always get started by introducing the OAD leadership style matrix, where we look at generalists versus specialists and socially oriented from technically oriented. I, John Lane, am a...
You're a socially oriented generalist in the builder quadrant. You are a negotiator.
And Will, you are a technically oriented generalist.
Yep. I'm in the architect quadrant. I'm a developer.
And Terrance,
I bet he's socially oriented journalist too. Looks like it.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's a builder.
And you're a builder. We are lousy with builders. And I personally like to build.
Which builder heading?
I believe it
was it Adventure?
That's right.
It was a variation. We got a variation.
We got a variation. Well, let's go into that. We'll ask your question.
Terrance, how does it feel to be compressed into a two-dimensional table?
It's easy to see, harder to understand if you don't know the table. But also, because it's almost a split image on each side, I needed John and Will to explain some of that.
It's definitely. This is why when I do my work, I never just send the report out. I take a minute to explain, because it's once you get it, it makes sense the way it's laid out, but a little helps. So let's go through this. So everyone's OAD assessment comes out like this. We show the quadrant builder and the typical trait adventurer. Now everyone noticing, they're writing it down at home. Questions for later. What does variation mean? Well, I'll explain that. So we look and we read the relative traits: assertiveness, extroversion, patience, detail orientation, from right to left. Further right it is, the more dominant it is. Further to the left, the more subordinate. So Terrance's most dominant trait is assertiveness. Assertive people tend to be risk takers, comfortable with ambiguity, delegators, a bit venturesome and independent. If I didn't say delegator, they like to delegate. His next two dominant traits are tied: extroversion and patience. I'll do extroversion first. This where this comes in here, and the reason it is a variation is that the E is usually back here, more of a people pleaser. So this means that you're going to be this combination of a person, extroverted person, but you're going to pick up a little bit more detail orientation than a typical Pathfinder. And then you're also a variation because the P in Pathfinder is usually down past the D, and so you have a lot more patience than a typical Pathfinder. Now, you're an impatient dude. We look at the P and the A; they're separated from each other, but compared to other Pathfinders, you're a little more chill. And then our friend D down here is just the opposite of the assertive person. So you're a clear generalist in this way. So that's you. Now let's bring it into a little bit more specific. So this is what I mentioned earlier, Will. We now have a way to take these generic profiles, never say that word, and then I can create some that are filtered with our guests' actual traits. So it's
Great.
Kind of a hybrid. So why don't you talk to Terrance about that?
So on your results, Terrance, when you land in the builder quadrant in your category, you're going to get these kind of superpower readouts. Is there one from this page that really leaps out at you? Either you notice it about yourself, others have pointed it out about you, or maybe both those things culminated. Does one of those really shout?
Yeah, I would say the enjoy challenges. I would say that one is probably the one I hear the most.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'd say running for mayor means you enjoy a challenge. Yeah. On the other side, right? Kryptonite, things get hard, stressful. These are traits that popped up in your readout. Which one of these really lands with you?
Yeah, sometimes I can lock in to my own agenda and forget that I'm so that one really looked familiar when I saw it.
Yeah, totally. That's a good one. I was glad of that. All right. So now let's get more into the personal. What do these stuff mean to you, Will?
Yeah. So when you studied the results and kind of you did your homework with John and shared your thoughts, you penned down some things that mattered to you. Walk me through these three, if you will, please, on this slide. These are your superpowers and things that you felt like the OAD assessment really accurately pulled out.
Yeah, I would say the very first one, being more comfortable with challenges. I have grown into that role. I graduated with my undergraduate. I was a teacher, and I stayed safe for a long time. And then I began to be an entrepreneur and take sort of chances, and never looked back. I actually enjoyed it, but it was an opportunity where lost a job, lost an opportunity, was forced into this space, and it pulled out something in my personality that now I'm completely comfortable with challenges. I think some people have a brand of like harsh, stern decision making or emotion that's they believe is effective or more effective than just having a friendly demeanor. And I haven't quite found that to be true. Most of the people that mentor me and connect with me have a friendlier spirit and demeanor than those who are less effective as they are. And then for me, I just think autonomy, allowing people to actually make and own their own freedom, what we live for in this country. I think living that out at the individual level, I think is magical.
Was there a moment or an experience or occurrence that led to you to step out of that safe place and become that person that embraces and tackles a challenge? I'm sure that when you were a couple years into your teaching career, you weren't sitting there thinking, man, I got to run for mayor. So there must have been a moment, maybe it was a life circumstance, someone that you encountered. What led to you finally stepping out of that?
Yes, I literally had a teaching job. And I thought I was going to retire. I was happy. It was fine. And then I wanted to accept a job at the county level in the central office. So I put in my 2 weeks notice with that particular private school. Was going to go and move to central office administration. And a couple of days before the offer was presented to me, the district said that the job is gone. My son was 1 year old. and they already filled the 2-week notice position.
Oh,
And
wow.
And so that's what thrust me into having to have courage to face challenges. And so over time, I don't know how I can go back to 9 to 5 predictable. I actually like the challenge of challenges, but I wasn't like that before. Safety was number one, predictability was number one, and so over time,
Yeah, you are not that now.
yeah,
Yeah, they
Definitely
yanked that
not.
rug, man.
yeah.
Well, that you just told us a story that, went from, safe and secure and have a plan to, stressful and challenging and no plan. What am I going to do? That's when your superpowers can invert and become kryptonite. You
That's right.
made some notes here for us on those things. Talk us through this slide.
Yeah, so for me, I often in my mind minimize how important a confrontation can be for progress. And so oftentimes I don't engage in them because I think it's going to set me back. I'm losing time for productivity. I remember one time I was leading a national organization and they were some years behind in technology. And I felt that if I just move them forward lightning speed, that they'll understand once the benefits start to and that led to several confrontations that I put on the back burner to get the plan through. And if I was to go back in time, some of those confrontations may have been beneficial to ushering in a whole new paradigm of technology. And then on the comfortable with disagreements, I know that they're coming. Even with the story I just shared with you, if I would have listened to some of those disagreements, it would allow for me to select a different pace to that rollout of the technology rather than moving at lightning speed, assuming that the benefits will speak for itself. But yeah, it's definitely both of those are tied together.
Yeah, John talked earlier about that line, the soil of leadership includes disagreements.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're absolutely right. And that being a good leader is, being wrong
That's right.
and learning from it.
That's right.
And then hopefully, growing from that error and not repeating it exactly the same way. We are going to make similar mistakes, and we'll get to that in the bloopers segment. But hopefully you learn something from it.
Yeah, it's almost like you learn more from failure than you do from success broadly. I think you can learn a lot more from disagreements, or seeking out certain disagreements to understand. Like if you had sought out the people who were resistant to whatever their particular feelings about the technology rollout, you probably would have learned something to do it better and gone faster.
That's right.
So that is a really good point. Thank you.
Speaking of learnings, yeah, John, right here, leadership lessons applied. That's what the slide says. Slides don't lie.
They do not.
Terrance, you went through this exercise. You took the assessment. You did your homework with John. We went through the pre-show, and now you've experienced this pod with us. Think about those superpowers. Think about the kryptonite. Think about the OAD experience and results. What did you learn from this? What, good and bad? What was reinforced? What was new information? How can you take this experience and apply it and grow professionally and otherwise in all your endeavors?
One, when you live your life and you form into a certain leadership style, you start to think that there's something unique about it. And this exercise was so simple, very efficient, and it was predictable. It predicted my behavior very well. That it's shown that I can actually go and get advice and support from people because my leadership style is a style that others have. And your tool predicted it very well. And so for me, it's just, I'm not alone in this style. And I can learn.
Interesting. Yeah.
Do you have a, coach? Do you kind of like a personal, board of advisors, some mentors? Do you have people in your life that you kind of, bounce that stuff off of?
Yes, I have two types. I have leaders who have a similar style that I have, at least from my observations, and have lived a story to tell. I sort of sit at their feet quite often. For example, like Dr. Dudley Flood, who is in the North Carolina Hall of Fame for ushering in, the integration of public schools. His demeanor is very soft, but that task was hard and challenging and difficult. Then I sit with people who have different leadership styles than I do and just get their thoughts on ideas and opinions. I like to critically think. I don't want everyone that's all in the same choir. I would love to hear from others. And so for me, I try to pull from both sides.
I think it's kind of an academic approach, which is similar to like the scientific approach, which is you have a theory, which is a policy or something you want to, but if you don't go around the table and find and poke holes in it, those holes are going to be found and likely at a bad time. So you want to do that research up front and make sure you're as tied to the policy or the thing that you're doing as well as you can. So I love that, and I hope that our work here with you is beneficial to that approach.
No, it definitely is.
Wow, we talked about having you on. We got you on. We're coming to the end. You are a Who's Next nominee. Remind me who put you up?
Maggie Kane.
Mags. Great. I think her episode is up next. We keep a few in the can. So do you have somebody you would like to nominate?
Yes. I know him as Leo, but he just won Mayor of Durham. So Mayor Williams.
Awesome.
And I'm excited about him. His leadership is very powerful, very direct. And so different than mine. And that's why I think I appreciate it.
Awesome.
That's great. Thank you.
Well, I'll work with you offline to invite the mayor. I'm sure he's got a few other things to do than a quirky podcast, but who knows? Maybe the OAD assessment is going to be good for him as he goes through. His leadership traits are going to be put under stress for sure. So we will see that. I can't believe it's over.
Here's a trivia question. Sorry.
Go.
Durham, is that part-time too, like Raleigh?
Part-time as well. That's actually he owns a restaurant that's named after his wife, Zwelly's.
Yeah.
Very nice. Very nice.
John. I wonder if
that's
that's
a good plug. Say the name of the restaurant.
State.
Say the name and the location for our listeners.
Yeah, it's Zwelly's. It's in the underground. It's the only West African Zimbabwean restaurant, I believe, in the country, least in North Carolina.
All right then. Well, we'll support both members of the family, and thank you for that recommendation and nomination. I'm John Lane.
I am Will Barfield,
and all of us are a work in progress. Thank you, Terrance.
Thanks. Great show.
We'll see you out in the city.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you. Work in Progress is a podcast presentation of Slipshod Productions. Available on LinkedIn and YouTube. Executive produced and starring John Lane and Will Barfield. Talent booking, production, and editing by John Lane. Thanks for watching. See you next week.